Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of Lazio Lounge. Much better than next Sunday, Alasdair. Finally a victory in Serie A for Lazio. What's your thought, Braveheart of Lazio?
It's relief above all at this stage, I have to say. I was very happy to get the 3 points, and like we were talking about last week, we knew it was going to be a difficult game because it always is with Chievo, and it's a team that has caused us all sorts of problems in the past. So delighted to get 3 points, although I think we'll both agree there were still things to be concerned about in there, but it is great to see that they, after what had been a pretty poor first half performance, they managed to turn it around and eventually get the winner, and a really, really good winning goal as well from Milinkovic, and exactly the kind of thing we've been waiting to see from him, I think, for the last couple of games too.
It was surprising, I don't know if you agree, that Lazio played much better in the second half. I thought, well, now players are going to get tired, and our bench, you don't have all those quality players you will expect to bring in and make the difference. Instead, I don't know, I would say it's all due to Milinkovic-Savic stepping up and start playing again as the Milinkovic-Savic everybody knew. But true fact is that in the second half, Lazio pretty much dominated the match, which I thought was a little bit surprising. I thought Lazio could collapse or feel tired before Chievo. Instead, it was the other way around. I don't know. Do you think the fact that Lucas Leiva went out changed things? Maybe he wasn't in a great condition.
Yeah, well, I think I was surprised. Not necessarily surprised, but I think it definitely had an effect on the game that it was a fairly conservative team that Inzaghi chose, and it was, it's the same team that he picked against Juventus in the Supercoppa, and it did very well in that game. But then again, that's a game in which you expect to be on the back foot, I suppose, and to be the team that's soaking up most of the pressure rather than the team that's trying to apply the pressure. So I think having Lucas Leiva in the midfield, having Basta and Lulic on either side and the three defenders, I think Lazio did really struggle to actually not only create chances but actually impose themselves on the game. And one of the points I was just making to you before we came on air here was about the fact that one thing you expect against Chievo is that you'll spend a lot of time in possession trying to, pick your way through their defence, whereas in the first half it wasn't like that at all, and Chievo were the ones who were having, most of the ball and creating the better chances. So perhaps taking the early lead wasn't a good thing for Lazio in a way, because they did seem, like you say, to take their foot off the gas afterwards. But as, to repeat a common football cliche, I think it's great to see that this team respond, under difficult circumstances, and eventually win the game, even if it was late on. Yes.
Yeah, you're right, it was late, but let's be honest, Immobile today missed 3 at least amazing chances. The first one, when we were still 1-0, he tried to dribble past Sorrentino and lost the ball. And then in the second half, Milinkovic-Savic did an assist that was simply unbelievable, pure genius. Mm-hmm. And he was in front of the keeper again and shot wide. From a striker like him, I expect him to score all those chances. So at the end, Milinkovic-Savic had to do it on his own. But I really feel that Lazio deserved to win and could have scored earlier and closed that match earlier.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to be too critical of Immobile today, actually, because we talked last week about the game against Spal, how he was coming very deep and he was trying to do everything himself. Whereas tonight, I think he actually, even though his finishing wasn't great in the chances that you've just mentioned there, he was making those kind of runs again, and his movement was a lot more dangerous. It was a lot more what you expect to see from him. So even if he didn't finish off those chances, he was at least kind of finding himself in those positions more. And especially if you compare that to Felipe Caicedo after he came on, I mean, that was, for me, a great way of actually being able to appreciate how good Immobile is off the ball, because Caicedo's positioning and his movement just seems absolutely terrible. I mean, before we even talk about how many fouls he gives away, there was a moment at the end of the match there where Marisic came. He was sent clear through, had loads of space to pick out a cross from the right-hand side, and Immobile and Caicedo both in the box. But Immobile, he's knackered by then, as 90th minute or whatever, and Caicedo's, you're screaming at the television, saying, run to the front post, make some sort of run, make some movement, and he's just hovering at the penalty spot, not moving at all. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Inzaghi sees something in Caicedo if he's sending him on in a game like this. But for me today, Caicedo versus Immobile made you appreciate how good Immobile really is.
I thought Caicedo didn't play that bad. Honestly, I thought that he was much better than I expected. This means that I didn't expect that much, of course. But at the same time, he did something good. Of course, you have to think that he's still not in the good condition, and he can improve, hopefully. But yeah, that wasn't that bad. The thing I thought it was obvious today is that last year Lazio had 3 players that could change the match: Keita, Felipe Anderson, and Milinkovic-Savic. Of these 3, in the first half, nobody played because Milinkovic-Savic wasn't there. And in the second half, when Milinkovic-Savic started playing, Lazio became more dangerous. Lazio have to hope to find another Keita and to have Felipe Anderson back as soon as possible. Luis Alberto, it's a new ad for me. I thought he can be really dangerous on the free kick. And as an assist man, he showed it today. But I still think he's not that game changer as Milinkovic-Savic, Keita and Felipe Anderson. Don't know if you're...
I think the team kind of needed to prove a point again after last week that they can win games without Felipe Anderson, because I think a lot of the reaction to last week's result was the fact that Anderson wasn't there, and Lazio lacked a spark and some sort of creative impetus that he can provide in that team. So the fact that he managed to win without him is very, very promising, actually. But again, I mean, it's promising, but it's not enough. And Milinkovic-Savic had a very good second half, but you need 90 minutes out of him. I think he was our best player today, but you can't rely on that in order to actually win games. And I'm still not convinced about the guys who are being brought off the bench as well. I mean, I think for me, I mentioned this last week as well, but I think in terms of what we're doing to try and change a game, I'm still not convinced that I still kind of miss that tactical flexibility that we had last season, where you can change formation. And I understand you made the point last season we might not have last week that we might not have the players to switch to a 4-3-3 necessarily right now. But Inzaghi just essentially did the same thing this week. He brought on Caicedo and the 2 new wing backs, and yes, we eventually got the result. But it's hardly inspired. It's hardly giving the opposition much more to think about.
When Lucas Leiva went out, I thought, wow, Murgia is not coming in. This is the second match of the season after he scored the winning goal in the Supercoppa Italiana, and Murgia didn't play 1 minute. Now, what I'm thinking is, when will he play? I mean, if he doesn't play today, coming in for Lucas Leiva, then there's something I don't understand. And you cannot say, well, he was playing rubbish, He scored the final goal in the Supercoppa. And as you were saying, Inzaghi made the same subs of last Sunday. So I thought maybe giving a chance to Murgia could have been an option, especially looking that the midfield was quite slow again this Sunday. So maybe bringing a midfielder like Murgia could have been an option. Were you surprised as well? or you were expecting that?
Well, yeah, probably not as surprised as it was last week, just because it happened. He was ignored last week as well, but it has to be a surprise in any circumstance, any context here, that a guy like you say who's scored the winning goal in a big match is being overlooked now. And Leva was never going to last 90 minutes. But this was clearly something Inzaghi would have thought about beforehand, because he would have known that Leva wasn't gonna last the full match. So Caicedo, for all his faults, I'm still very much not convinced by him. I think at least he is a striker, so he's playing in that role. So if at that period of the game we're going for the win and he's trying to bring on more attacking option perhaps than Murgia, and then with the attacking kind of impact that Lukaku and Maricic could have, perhaps he just knows that they're going to have a bigger impact on the game, whereas a guy like Murgia he's a fantastic talent and a great option to have on the bench, but he's not necessarily the first person you turn to when you're needing a goal desperately. I know he did score that goal against Juventus, but that's not necessarily the one thing that you expect him to bring to a game. So I expect we'll probably see more of him coming off the bench in games that we're already in front, or you're trying to see out the rest of it. So that's why I wasn't surprised, to answer your question, I suppose, just because it was the same situation as last week.
I don't know. I mean, especially after Marusic not playing that well, I would have tried to give a chance to Murgia, as every time he comes in, he's a game changer. Marusic, again, even today, he wasn't what I expected. I was thinking, why in the friendly match he was so great, and now suddenly the season start and he's not making the difference anymore.
Well, we've got to start getting to some of the comments we've had on Twitter here, actually. First one I was going to read out is from Christopher Thomas, who said that it's a brilliant result, but the same thing stands. A few more injuries and we're crippled, which is, I think, something that many people are picking up on in our Twitter feed here. And then he said, how important was that tackle by Wallace in the 78th minute? I can't remember the exact minute, but I'm almost certain I know the one he's talking about, where Wallace was pretty much stranded one-on-one. Rami Al-Jendi has been complaining that the defence was woeful. He's also not happy with Immobile. Lulic was a disaster. Lucas really struggled. All of this after not to be negative. But so what did you think about the defence? Moving on from those two comments there from Rami and Christopher, in the game, I mean, that was a great tackle from Wallace. I think Wallace did actually have a few really good moments tonight, but they were under some serious pressure, actually, and more pressure than they found themselves under against Spal a week before. So what were your thoughts on that?
I was impressed by Radu. I don't love him very much, but this year he's playing really, really well. He's not making mistakes, and he's giving a big hand to De Vrij. So I was impressed. Wallace is playing well. I think he's improved compared to last season, where every match he was making at least a little mistake. While, again, today he was superb, and that probably saved Lazio a goal, because he made an incredible save on that ball. De Vrij, again, he's playing really, really well. He looks a different player from last season. It's true that Chievo didn't put too much pressure in the second half, but I think the defense played really, really well. And Strakosha made one terrific save just after Chievo score. I thought that could be a game changer. If Chievo scores there, then the match could become really complicated. So I think the defense played well. When Lucas Leiva came off, then of course the midfielder wasn't covering that much the defense, and so it started to struggling a little bit more. But apart that thing of Wallace, I don't remember Chievo having just after the goal Lazio scored. I think was Castro or Inglese who had the incredible header to draw, but I think we played very well there.
Yeah, I mean, we've someone else who's got in touch with us tonight is Vinovu, who's sent us a list of kind of numbered points here, but one of them is that he doesn't want Radu, Lulic and Basta together to start a game with a three-man defence. You think that's harsh? I mean, I, again, was not impressed by Lulic, and I think him coming off today wasn't so much just, being tired as the fact that he didn't play well defensively or going forwards. I'm still really not convinced by him in that role, to be honest, as the left wing back. I think he doesn't use the ball intelligently enough. He gives it away far too often, and defensively, when we've seen him play left back in a four-man defence, defensively his game has still got a lot to be desired. So to be honest, I think he's better used being an alternative in the middle of that midfield than he is in his current role. Again,
I wrote it during the match. Lulic wasn't playing that great, and the problem with Lulic is that he has this type of matches where he makes incredible mistakes, and then has other matches where he can be the man of the match because he can run a lot, he has good ball skills, and can make a lot of good assists. But then there are matches like this one where he's simply terrible. And you have to give credit to Inzaghi because he subbed him pretty much at the beginning of the second half. So again, we said it already, saying that if you have Lucas Leiva in the midfield and you play with Basta and Lulic, then maybe you're too defensive, and probably that's one of the reasons why Lazio was a little bit too slow in the first half to move the ball and allowed Chievo to defend much better. In the second half, things changes. But I think that Inzaghi is convinced that from one side, Lukaku is not fit to play 90 minutes. From the other side, Marusic is still... he still didn't learn enough to play a full match in Serie A. He still struggles. He still needs to learn a couple of things before being a starter. So that's why Lulic and Basta are playing. And again, today Basta played a good match again, which was a surprise for me.
Yeah, I mean, this was actually... I'm glad you've just made all those points, because one of the other questions we've had was from Magni BEE, who's asking about why Lukaku isn't starting because he makes so many attacking opportunities. So yeah, like you say, his fitness is still probably not quite up to it. And I suppose the other side of that as well is that he does make many attacking opportunities, but he also he leaves a lot more space behind him than someone like Lulic would in that role as well. So I suppose he's a different kind of player, perhaps a more risky kind of player to play in that system. Although, to be fair, he did make a couple of very good recovery tackles tonight as well after he came on. One of the other points Vinovu made there, picking up on something you said, Vittorio, is that Inzaghi was all wrong with the choice of system and the choice of players initially, yet he'll turn things around. Beneficent coach. The choice of system, I think I don't really have a problem with his initial choice of system. I think, like I said before, it was probably, if anything, a bit too negative for the opposition we were facing. But at least the one thing I was encouraged by was that he seemed to react to what was going on a bit quicker this week than he did last week. Like you said, the substitutions he made were pretty soon after the second half had started. And although they didn't turn out to be absolutely crucial in winning the game. It did kind of, Lazio did enter into a fairly dominant period of the game in the second half of the match. So I think he did manage to kind of react to the game situation this week better than he did last week.
And one thing is that we all talk about 3-5-2 when we talk about Lazio. But if you see the match, you understand that Lazio changed very often during the same match, the tactics. So we started with a 3-5-1-1 with Luis Alberto behind Immobile. Then Luis Alberto went on the same line of Immobile. Then in the second half, it was Milinkovic and Luis Alberto behind Immobile. And at a certain point, especially in the first half, it was more 3-1-4-1 with Lucas Leiva behind the midfielder and more closer to the defense. So the good thing of Inzaghi and of the players is that he can change around. And we saw it, for example, in the first friendly match, I think against Bayer Leverkusen, with the two wings playing at the same level of the defender, so it was more a 5 defender. And with Lukaku and Marusic coming in, it was more a 3-3-3-1, with Lukaku and Marusic very high at the same line with Luis Alberto. So this creates a lot of problems for the opposite team because they have to change position and maybe change marking players, because if Luis Alberto goes at the level of the midfielder, then you cannot mark him with a defender there, so you have to switch. And this is something that allows Inzaghi to change tactics without making subs, and at the same time create problems with the opposite team. So I think, we talk about 3-5-2, but Lazio is able to change a lot of things around, and that's a good quality. Especially, I said it often, but for me, Milinkovic-Savic get more dangerous the more he gets near the net, the box, and he showed it today. So if he starts in the line of the midfielder, he's a great midfielder, but his top quality are assist man and scoring. So that was one of the reasons why Lazio won today.
But one of the other things, we've had a couple of people, Ibrahim Elbeti is saying Leiva is very slow. I hope we can see Di Gennaro. And then Vinovu after that says the big question for me is how far can Inzaghi build a system around the talented Luis Alberto if it is inhibiting other players? Do you think it is inhibiting other players? The fact that Luis Alberto is being used, Luis Alberto, I suppose, has become a first choice player within this system. Di Gennaro there, who Ibrahim Elbeti mentioned, a guy who's obviously a new signing, but someone we've barely seen so far. Not seen him at all in any of the competitive games, and seems like someone who would perhaps be able to, play in that playmaker role when Lucas Leiva isn't. So have you been surprised that we haven't had a sight of him yet?
Yep, absolutely. I thought when they signed him that he would have been the sub of Lucas Leiva. Instead, it looks like Inzaghi is making other decision. Probably he's not fit enough to play. That's my idea. But it's surprising not seeing him play, because I thought that was his position. When Lucas Leiva came out today and Caicedo came in, then the tactics changed completely, and Luis Alberto did the playmaker, but wasn't playing in the same position of Lucas Leiva. He was playing at least 3-4 meters in front of where Lucas Leiva was playing, and this of course created more chances for Chievo because they had an open space. But at the same time, Lazio was still dangerous because I think Luis Alberto is playing really, really well. For me, has to improve in the last 15 meters, because with his talent, he should be an assist man. But at the moment, and maybe even score a little bit more, but at the moment he's not doing that. or at least he's not providing that many assists that I expected. At the end of the day, Milinkovic-Savic probably served more important ball to Immobile than Luis Alberto, but still I think that Luis Alberto gave that quality in the midfield that at the moment is missing. But I don't think he's taking away something from the other players. Again, Parolo for me is not at his level, especially thinking about the injury he had, etc. But don't forget that we're still in August, so I would be scared if all of my players would have been in top condition now, because this would mean that probably in May they will be all down on their knees. Instead, we have to say that nobody is in top form at the moment. Probably the one who could be is Radu, because he's playing so well. But I don't think the other Lazio playing are at the top level, so that's good, because they'll need to improve. Especially, don't forget that after this break, there's going to be Lazio-Milan, and then the Europa League is going to start, so we're going to play every 3 days. So we need a lot of players.
Yeah, and I think with Alberto, something we just have to kind of be grateful for is the fact that he is that we're actually having this discussion, I suppose. You know, this is a guy who quite easily could have just drifted completely out of the squad or out of our consciousness, because he wasn't really involved last season. He was played, you know, on the wing mostly, and didn't really get too many opportunities. And now we're talking as a guy who's playing in a playmaker role, in a central midfield role, in an attacking midfield role, and so that versatility it shows what a useful, talented player he is. So I think we can forgive him for, if there are any kind of criticisms of his performances so far. I think it's you have to take a step back and appreciate the fact that we're talking about a guy who easily could have not been there, who's now become quite a key player in Inzaghi's team for this season. So I don't think it does inhibit other players, basically, to answer that question, to have Alberto. I don't believe the team's necessarily being built around him, because I don't think he's going to be handed the keys to the midfield and told to dictate the game in the way that Belia did before. I think he's just an extra creative presence that's available within that team. And a very useful one. I do think we will see Di Gennaro, the likes of him, and Morgia. I'm sure he will get more game time, and that brings us on very nicely, I suppose, to the Europa League question, which is from Tom Sheldrick here, which is what kind of team do you expect Inzaghi to play in the Europa League, and will the minimal travel time for the away fixtures affect his selection? So just to recap, the Europa League draw, obviously, I'm sure everyone already knows about this, but it took place on Friday, and we've got Nice from France, we have Vitesse from the Netherlands, and we have Zulte Waregem, or however you pronounce it, from Belgium. Apologies to any Belgian listeners. So, given that you can often end up in the far Eastern Europe in the Europa League, it's quite nice travel time, like Tom Sheldrick points to there. I doubt personally that will have much of an impact on Inzaghi's selection, the travel time, but I think that will be more likely the time when we see more rotation than we have done up until this point. I don't know if you agree.
Well, he'll have to, because playing every 3 days, you cannot expect all these players to play, especially because you have to think about De Vrij, Radu, Basta, all players that often get injured. So if they can rest a little bit, that's going to be better for them and for the squad. So I expect a little bit of turnover. I'm not thinking that he's going to change completely the team. So let's say that around 11, I think 5 or 6 will keep playing. But for example, I expect Bastos to play. I expect Murcia to have more play time. Marusic as well could have more time there. And don't forget, we have players like Creco and Lombardi that I don't know how much they're going to play this season. One for the tactics and the other one because he has so many players in front. So Europa League, Coppa Italia could be a good option for them to play. The biggest question is what's going to happen in front, because at the moment the strikers are Immobile, Caseido, and Palombi. So you don't have that much turnover there. So this, I don't know if we have a transfer market question, but I think when Inzaghi said we need someone there, it's because really talking about numbers, we don't have enough strikers. It looks like Djordjevic could end to Cagliari, so we're going to see in the next 7 days. But my question is, Kishna, Morrison, and all the other players that are out of the squad, when the transfer market ends, will they be back? Will they be available to play? Because I think Kishna and Morrison, for example, could be useful for this team.
It's crazy, really, to be in this situation. Again, I mean, it's not unusual, but 3 days left in the market, and there's all these players you've mentioned too, and obviously the obvious one, Keita as well, who aren't in the squad at the moment and need to be sold. But what happens if they aren't sold? I think Kishna, I would certainly reintegrate into the squad because there isn't the same sort of bad blood necessarily between him and Inzaghi and perhaps the players as there would be with like trying to bring Keita back in, where it's very clear what his intentions are. Morrison's a bit of a difficult one because he's hardly even been in Rome, so I can't really see that happening, to be honest. I think it's so clear that he doesn't have a future at Lazio. I understand everyone deserves a second chance, but he seems to have been given a few chances, and I'm not sure if he's ever going to take it. If there was some sort of statement of intent coming from his part, or some sort of commitment or motivation that was clear that he was, wanting to be a part of this team and wanting to improve, then I would say absolutely, but haven't really seen anything like that coming from him, which makes me doubt whether it's a good idea, because as well as the fact that he's an unpredictable player, he's also got a reputation as being quite a disruptive character. So I don't know if you necessarily want him reintegrated into that squad unless you're absolutely sure that he's going to bring something on the pitch. I don't know. I mean, would you want both of them back in the team?
It depends what happened in these 7 days. Of course, if Lazio buys a replacement for Keita and a replacement for Hut, then you can leave them there. But otherwise, why not? And honestly, Morrison didn't have a chance with Lazio. I know that you don't like them, you don't like him a lot, but he hardly played. So if again, of course, if he trained seriously and behave correctly, then again, I would give him a chance. But for example, what about Marchetti? If he doesn't go anywhere, why don't we bring him back in the squad and maybe he can play Coppa Italia or Europa League or something like that? I mean, it's a waste of money like that. So
it's a complete waste of money. I mean, I've said all along, I don't see why Marchetti can't stay as part of the squad. And if Strakos is going to be the number one, then have him have Marchetti as his mentor. I think the problem's more that Marchetti's not going to want to accept that role. But if it gets to a point where there's nobody going to sign him, you say, look, you can play in the Europa League games, you can play in the Coppa games, you'll play if Strakos picks up an injury, you're still going to get some football this season. It's going to be better than being frozen out of the team waiting for another contract. And Marchetti knows that game after his time at Cagliari. So I'm sure he's not going to want to end up in that kind of situation again where he's not playing any football. And that's going to be quite damaging.
And Strakosha again played really, really well today, but I don't know. I'm not confident about Vargic. He improved, but if I can choose, I prefer having Marchetti on the bench more than Vargic. So again, it's not our decision, but it would be good to know what's happening after the transfer market close.
Yeah, I mean, I keep saying it's going to be an eventful week every week, and it never really is. So I'm just waiting for some sort of breakthrough with these transfers where things start to happen. One of the other questions we had from Magna BEE was, he says we need 2 players, and what position is most important to bring in? Well, I think you've just hit that one on the head, Vittorio, by saying that we need another forward player.
Absolutely,
it's crazy. It's a crazy lack of options, and
absolutely,
we saw Palombi against Spal. No one was particularly impressed. I think we need to give him time. We need to stay realistic and say he's a young player and he's going to improve with more time he spends on the pitch. But what that probably did demonstrate that much is that he's not ready yet. And then Caicedo, who knows? I mean, some people have been positive about his performances, some people haven't. But I'm not convinced he's going to be the guy who's going to be able to fill Immobile's shoes while he's injured. So that has to happen. Centre back has to be filled as well, because you need someone to fill in for Hoot. You can't really hope to play with 3 at the back all season with only 5 centre backs. So that needs to happen too. But yeah, I mean, it's obviously the more attractive thing to focus on is which players are coming in, but realistically, for Lazio and Lazio's funds, something that needs to be focused on probably more than the incoming is the outgoing and getting these players sold. What's going to happen with the Keita situation?
Absolutely.
Who knows? I mean, all these stories this week about Inter coming in for a deal, and then Litari comes out and says that it's not going to happen. So it's just an absolute maze.
He said there are some offer on the table, but the player wants to go to Juventus, so maybe Juventus can increase the offer and see where we go. You said that Caicedo, we need a player that replaces Immobile when he's injured, even when he's not injured, because I hope that he's not going to play that much in Europa League. So I hope there's going to be a player there to play in his place. Will that be Palombi Caicedo? I'm a little bit worried, especially seeing how Palombi played. I'm still confident that he's a great player and he will improve, but maybe we need another striker there and give Palombi, the last 35 minutes of the match to get used to football, etc. Talking about the defender, there is Bastos, there is Felipe, but after that, we need another one, absolutely. So I hope, and Inzaghi said,
Paletta.
Oh my, the worrying thing about Paletta is that Simone Inzaghi in the press conference before the match said Paletta could be an option because he knows Serie A very well. So there could be.
He knows Serie A very well because he's played in it for the last 50 years. So
badly. No, to be honest, when he was in Parma, he had a couple of great seasons. But then when he switched to Milan, he was awful. But he knows Serie A. So one thing very important was, think about Luis Alberto. He arrived the last day of the transfer market last summer. And pretty much, words of Simone Inzaghi, he got to know Serie A just around January. So this means if you buy a defender or a striker coming from somewhere else abroad, he will take a lot of time to get used to Serie A. So this means that if you're buying a player now, probably you will be able to use it in January if it's not coming from Serie A. So that's an interesting point that we often forget. Of course, if you're buying Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo, that's a different discussion. But do you believe we're going to spend that money to get a key player, top player of that level? I don't. So that's the thing that scares me more, because maybe you're going to get a replacement of Keita, but it's going to be the 2nd of September, and it's going to take time for him to get used to Serie A football.
Well, it always will, and that's the thing, and it kind of needs to be a player who's able to adapt quickly. But then the players who are already within the league are going to be the players that cost them more money. So you either take a gamble on a player from a smaller league or someone who's not so familiar with it and spend less money, or you actually decide to cash out on somebody who you know is going to do the job. And I mean, there's all sorts of names, but for instance, a guy like Stevan Jovetic, whose name has been linked with Lazio for however long. But if you talk about someone like that, at least he knows the game. But again, fitness is a problem, injuries are a problem, so you don't really want to go and spend all your money on a guy who could easily just hurt himself and be out for months afterwards. So it's terrible that it's taken this long, because all the kind of logical decisions that have to go into actually seeing through a transfer, by this point you've had to sacrifice a lot of them. So I'm not overly optimistic about what we will get in. In terms of Paletta, I think he's become a bit of a laughingstock because he hasn't aged particularly gracefully at Milan. But I think you have to remember this wouldn't be a signing for him to come in and be starting every game for us. So I think if someone like that comes in and he plays in the back three in Europa League games and so on, it's not the end of the world. It's not the same as having Wesley Hoot, because he's obviously a young player who had a lot of potential to improve, and it's obviously something Paletta doesn't have. But I don't think we should be, saying it's the end of days for Lazio if that deal goes through.
No, it's not. But would you say that Lazio improved? And especially
not improved, but you need the bodies, I think, before the market closes. And if it's going to be him or nothing, I'm going to take him. But if some of these younger Dutch guys, for example, who've been linked to the club, how are you going to convince these guys to make the move to Lazio if it's so clear that their role is being the number 4, number 5 centre back in the team? It's not going to be too easy to do that with 3 days to go.
But you're coming to a big team, you're playing Europa League, and you have the chances to improve. Plus, the thing that concerned me more is that you sold Hurt for 50 million euros plus 2 of bonus. Where's all that money going? Because you sold Biglia and didn't use that money. You sold Hurt and you didn't use that money. Where are you putting them? Then you're buying a player for 30 million euros or 20? I don't think so. So where is that money going?
I think Lotito has been slowly gathering all these transfer fees from over the years, and he's going to use them all at once to meet Lionel Messi's release fee and beat PSG's transfer record. And all our problems will then be solved until it gets to the personnel contract agreement, and then it'll all fall apart.
I don't know. Well, we're going to see. There's 1 week missing, so everything can happen, hopefully.
Yeah, international break, isn't it? So there is at least some time off for these things to all take place. And I think that's, lots of people complain about the international break coming at this point because we feel like the football's only just started again and now we have to stop. But I think with all that's happening around Lazio in terms of these transfer this transfer chaos. Basically, it's probably not the worst thing in the world in order for after the window closes for Inzaghi to actually have a bit of time to regroup with whatever he ends up with. Who knows what he's going to have? So
I think it's perfect timing for Lazio because Inzaghi said after the match today that Felipe Anderson will be available and he has been badly missed. Lucas Leiva will probably be more fit and he will be able to play more. Casado as well. There are a lot of players that are not at a great level of condition, which should be concerning in a certain point because this is just the third official match we're playing. But yeah, it's perfect. You're going to have Felipe Anderson back and that should be resolving a lot of problems you have on front. And hopefully you're going to have 2 new signings to improve your roster and have finally a team able to compete in different competitions.
We will see. That's the dream.
Yeah. You didn't tell me the man of the match. Your man of the match today.
I think it has to go for me to Milinkovic-Savic, to be honest, just because I think in the first half he struggled a bit, but I think the whole team struggled a bit. So if you're going to pick out one individual, for me it's got to be the guy who's gone and pretty much single-handedly won the game for Lazio. And you mentioned earlier a couple of the assists he pulled off, and yeah, that flick over the top for Immobile was just fantastic.
Amazing,
great.
Amazing. Yeah.
So that kind of stuff that's like you said earlier. When you get him in those attacking positions, it's that kind of vision he's got. That's where you want him in those dangerous positions. So yeah, that's who gets it for me.
I agree. I think that today was the proof that if Milinkovic-Savic turns on, then Lazio turns on, become more dangerous, and that's why he's the man of the match for me, because he can change his matches at the moment like nobody else in the squad can. I'm still thinking that Lukaku, who unfortunately has been called with the Belgium squad, can improve his condition and he can be another game changer in a different way with his power and his speed. But at the moment, Milinkovic-Savic is the only one who can make a big impact in the match, especially if Immobile misses all these chances like he did today.
Yeah, I mean he did also score, so we got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, but if you see, he hit the post, so he was lucky there. He was going to miss even that one.
Oh, come on, it went in.
Yeah, at the end.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I think for me, Immobile's he looked more like him at his old self today than he did last week. I think his finishing wasn't the best, but you have to say as well, you can't criticise him too much for the volley he missed, because it was a great effort. I mean, I was off my chair. I was off celebrating because it hit the side netting, so I just saw the net ripple and I thought it was a goal. But his finishing wasn't the best, but he's getting himself in those positions. He's making the right runs, and I think that was quite encouraging for me, actually. It's still not the same thing, I know, but he did score and he did get himself a few chances, which he didn't even find the space to get himself any chances last weekend. So I think it was better from him. Definitely an improved performance.
Yeah. I think he was really good in the Supercoppa, and then after that he had that dip. So, but as we said, it's still August, so he has. I'm happy he's not in a great condition. He has still time to get there in the match that counts, starting from the next one against Milan.
Well, yeah, and like you said, there's no match next week, which means we'll be able to spend a whole podcast talking through all the amazing transfer deals that have been completed, I suppose, instead of
hundreds of new signings. Yeah, I can see it happening.
Exactly. Absolutely. But yeah, I mean that's going to be a huge match. It's going to be a really, really big match because obviously they've won both of their games so far. There's a lot of hype around them. and I think we can all agree that it would just be fantastic to take them back down to ground again. So we'll see. Well, a couple of weeks before then, but already looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it would be great if it comes.
Yeah.
Are we going to wrap it up here?
I think so.
So finally, a victory. 4 points. So we are above Roma now.
Still unbeaten.
Still unbeaten. I didn't count. Which episode is this one?
I don't know. It feels like about 400 by now. But
Because you're so tired about me, or?
oh no, just because it feels like we're going round in circles talking about Keita every. It feels like I've lived until the age of about 250, and all I've ever known is Keita transfer gossip. So, no, it's always a delight.
Ah, okay, good. You saved yourself in corner, as we say in Italy. Episode 14, by the way, I found out.
There we go.
So everybody,
Not bad then.
yeah, no, we're still alive. That's incredible. I never thought about that. We could continue that long.
Still going. Well, all thanks to the listeners, obviously.
Absolutely, they're the key point. They're the key of this podcast. Thanks for all the question and for their love. I think that's fundamental. We try just to, to promote Lazio outside Italy and to all the non-Italian fans that need something to hear to talk about Lazio, and we are here for this. And you can find us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube. We had like a lot of new subscribers on YouTube this week, so things are going even better. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, iTunes, of course. You can subscribe to our podcast to have it every week already on your phone. And thank you again, Alisdair, and have a nice week. And rest a little bit now that Lazio's not playing.
Yeah, I'll try to. If I can sleep after all the excitement.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
All right, thank you.
Second to nobody. Just stop the world. I'm the big girl. Sing loud the chorus. Football's pounding so. Watching